I would like to talk about my own journey, my own experience. It's my beginnings of contemplating does God exist or not starts in, I suppose, about junior high school. And I did not go to church. I had no church background, whatever. And my beliefs were, just opinion at the time, was that all beliefs, religious beliefs are myth, including God's existence, the existence of Christ. That's all mythology. And that the world evolved. And when you die, you're dead. That was just my basic belief. Now, I had a father who was always drunk. My mom finally left him. And after about a year, my dad comes back, and all of a sudden, we're going to church. And my dad said he'd become a Christian. So I'm entering the church, and I'm going, this is going to be interesting. Here I am contemplating that maybe there is a God. I mean, I can say that I experience that my dad certainly did change. And so the question was, he said God helped him, and he stopped drinking. And so I'm faced with looking at, well, is that even possible? Because I don't have that belief.
For the record, I have a similar experience with a grandfather who was a terrible alcoholic until my mom introduced him to Christianity and Jesus, and that's what he credits with no longer drinking alcohol.
Well, I've listened to a lot of the videos that you presented, Matt, and I like you because you can be real hard and tough on the logic, which I think is good. It's important. But you also have a soft side. You have a compassionate side. You also mentioned things about your own life.
Don't tell anybody.
I think, well, as you tell people, I can sense it, and I think others sense that as well. You're a compassionate man. You're not just a difficult, hard-headed man. You have some compassion. I think that's evident.
Thank you.
So for me, it also is, I didn't grow up in a home where there was a lot of love. And I am faced with the fact that all of a sudden now my dad's starting to show interest, and it's like, oh, he's finally interested in me. Because for the most part, I wasn't beaten. I wasn't treated poorly. He just was never around. He wasn't there.
Do you think
that he loved me was a question.
Whatever it was about starting to attend church that turned him into a better father, do you think that was more to do with the doctrines and the things being preached from the pulpit, or do you think that's got more to do with the community that he suddenly became a part of and the fact that he was interacting with people who had a shared goal towards the betterment of mankind? I feel like that would be more likely the reason why he changed his ways. And I can...
Listen, I remember talking to my friends who knew my dad, and they said, "What happened to your dad?" We hear a lot of stuff, and go, "Well," I said, "Well, what you've heard is true." And he goes, "Well, what made him change?" And I said, "I can't tell you. I don't know." And obviously, you can mention any possible factor, but I'm not being faced with that. I'm talking more about myself because I can't explain absolutely everything that went through my dad's life or what led him to that. So I can tell you about my life and what I was faced with. So
well,
I said to myself, I cannot say there's a God or not. I don't know. I can't say if there's a heaven or hell. I don't know that. But I'm now in a church where people believe this. And I remember sitting in the pew and I go, oh my God, these people believe that Jesus was actually a historical person.
Let me ask you this question real quick, because we are running short of time and I want to make sure we get to this. When Alex asked about whether it was more likely to be the doctrine of the community, let's say that even if it was the doctrine, I think we would all agree that if somebody is convinced that acting a certain way is what a God wants, that can fundamentally change somebody's life, whether or not there's actually a God who wants that, right?
Of course.
So the fact that somebody's life changes because they were introduced to a particular religious ideology is still independent of whether or not the ideology is rooted in truth or a God or the supernatural. It's like when I've talked about how, getting a structure to life if you've been unstructured before, you can convince somebody to be good with a fairly compassionate lie. And the fact that the fact that they become a better person doesn't tell you whether or not the underlying belief is true.
You're absolutely correct. And those thoughts ran through my mind as well.
Perhaps I can offer a little bit more of an oblique way to look at this.
Well, let me just say how I looked at it. Okay? I said, maybe there is a God. I don't know. How has this idea of God formed in human history? It's there. Been there for a long time. So I'm saying to myself, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is a God.
It's possible. I just don't think it's probable, right?
Maybe Jesus was a historical person. At that point, I'm saying, I don't know.
So this all stems from your observations of your father changing profoundly by finding Christ, right? Now, unfortunately, your story... I was just going to say, your story isn't unique. It's really sad, and I'm sorry to hear about the suffering that you've had, and I hope things are better. But your story's not unique because it doesn't matter where you go in the world. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. You'll find your story in the cultural context of other religions. So you'll find someone that was an alcoholic and he found Buddha. He became a Buddhist, which doesn't believe in a God, and it changed him profoundly. And then you could have his son saying the same as you and saying, well, maybe those beliefs are true. It's like, no, he found an ideology. He found something that comforts him.
So the question then becomes, how did you get from, hey, it's a myth, to, hey, maybe there's something to it, to then being convinced? What ultimately convinced you that this stuff was true?
Yes, studying. When I went to college, I'm talking about events that happened in the 1960s. I'm 67 years old.
Sure, studying. Studying what, and what was the specific evidence? Because you might, if I ask somebody what convinced you and they say investigating, that's not an answer.
Yes, well, that's what I said. I said to myself, you know what? The thing is, there's other religions. There's all kinds of. Is it a created world? Is it an evolved world? I'm just going to look at these from both perspectives. I'm going to see what the Christian world says. I'm going to read about what the opposite view is.
But this was kind of my point. There's not two perspectives. That's a black and white fallacy. There's many perspectives. There's all the other interpretations with religions.
No, wait. Whoa. Now you know automatically that if there's a view there is a God, then there's a view that there is no God.
Yeah, but you've accepted a particular God is what Stephen's addressing. And even in a view where there is no God, he's already addressed that with the idea of Buddhism. All I'm asking is, what was it?
You're not letting me get to why, are you? I just would like.
We're running out of time. I'd like you to get to why without a full story.
Well, I called you because I felt this was a place where you could dialogue, and you just don't try to solve things in a few minutes.
No, you can dialogue. One, we're under the pressure of time, and so it means that we push a bit quicker. And two, hang on. To repeat something that we were saying earlier is that if we don't accept a premise, then it makes sense to interrupt.
I called in an hour before the program.
I understand that. I'm just explaining that we're short on time, and we want you to get...
I do understand. I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. I'm just saying that it seems to me you set up the propositions. And in my studies, I set up 3 basic propositions.
Why 3?
But let him go.
Well, because you have to limit. You have to, if you're going to write something and do something, you could add other things.
Well, if you limit it to God as the only proposition, then you're done, right?
No, I didn't do that.
Okay. But that's why Stephen was asking why 3.
I compared, I set up, and I studied, and I eventually set up three basic worldviews. There's others, but the three basic worldviews. Okay. A worldview would, to me, incorporate what is human origin, what is human destiny, and then how do we derive these different views, atheistic versus pantheism, or panentheism, if you like, and in the theistic views, how do they then differ from their sense of origin and destiny, and then how do you derive human meaning, human morality, human freedom, free will, which you've discussed somewhat tonight. How do we look at that from these different perspectives? And how do we understand human thought, rationality? And trust me, gentlemen, pantheistic thought, Buddhist thought, is not like Christian thought.
We're aware of that. We're asking, what is the evidence that convinced you? I don't need a history lesson on religions or anything like that.
Well, first of all, not all views can be true.
Sure.
Right?
I also don't need a Logic 101. I'm asking for the evidence.
We are the evidence of something. We are the evidence of the accidental, as I say, Bertrand Russell, I thought made it very clear, like Bertrand Russell when I read his works. And we are the accidental collocation or collection of atoms.
Yeah, I don't know that we're even in the ballpark of evidence that would convince someone that there's a God, let alone a particular God.
Well, as I said, you look at what, to me, you compare what people say about human morals, human meaning, from one perspective versus the others, and then you decide which one makes more sense.
So if a particular group has statements about morals that you find particularly compelling, that means that the underlying cause or source that they claim is true?
No, you look through, you read what the people who are written, and you decide what the cases that they make.
No. That David is a methodology for assessing which morality you agree with or find compelling. It doesn't tell you anything at all about whether or not the source, the claimed source for that morality is true and real. For example, I find secular humanistic views about morality to be vastly superior to anything I've heard from a religion. But I would accept those even if they came from Buddhism, Christianity, whatever else. There's plenty of things within Christianity that I accept as good teachings, but that doesn't tell me whether or not there's a God that is relaying these teachings. So your methodology about evaluating moral claims is good for determining it's good for determining which moral claims you accept. It is not in any way a testimony to whether or not the claimed source of those moral claims is true.
I'm going to give you an example of one area because you've already discussed it, so we don't have to go into it very length. As you said, that based upon your worldview, everything is matter. There is no supernatural. There's only nature.
Actually, none of us said that. Yeah, none of us even came close to any of that.
We've expressed several times that we're in a position of basically agnosticism.
And it's also not relevant to the epistemology that you're trying to use, where you say, hey, I agree with this morality, therefore that God is the most likely one to exist.
There are people who don't believe there's free will.
Three of them sitting
nice
right
to
here.
meet you.
Exactly. Yes.
What does that have to do with what convinced you of God? I swear we're just running out of time.
I said that gives me, if somebody says there's no free will, and yet we have an illusion of it, so that begs the question, well, do we have it or not? And if we say we don't, then I would favor a view that says we do.
I don't care what you favor.
Yeah, I don't favor it.
Oh, no, I know you don't care what I favor, but I care what I favor.
Yeah, okay. Of course you do.
So you might as well have just called in to say that you favor a model that includes God.
I said, but the belief that everything is just nature, and there's that belief, it's called naturalism, and there is this belief, and that belief has led people to believe there is no free will.
If you think any of the three of us needed a course on naturalism, I'm trying to get to what actual evidence convinced you that a God exists.
Also, theology can just as easily get you there to know free will, I mean.
Oh, yes. Well,
Calvinism.
So it is precisely irrelevant.
Well, not relevant to you.
No, it's not relevant to the conversation that we're having.
See, there are many people who believe that is relevant, and you just say it's not relevant doesn't prove that it's not relevant.
We can demonstrate that it's not relevant.
It's relevant for people to decide if there's such a thing as free will, if I'm making decisions on my own.
It's not relevant to whether or not that is compelling, whether it is sufficient. You have sufficient warrant to accept that a God exists.
There are people who believe in free will, who believe in God, and those who don't believe in God. There are people who don't believe in free will and both believe in God, and equally people who don't believe in God. All four of those boxes are checked. So whether or not free will comes into the equation is irrelevant.
Yes, listen, one of the first things I studied in school too was the theologies of Calvinism versus Arminianism.
Well, but bear in mind, I mean, Calvinism isn't exactly an anti-free will view. It's just the view that kind of our destiny and where we end up in heaven or hell is determined. It's not like a deterministic. It's not deterministic in the same sense that we would say free will doesn't exist down to every single action. So it's not. It's actually not even the same thing that you're talking about there.
30 seconds. Why do you believe there's a God?
Because we are the evidence of we are personal beings who think rationally, who think rationally, have morals, and how is that possible that that we're a product of, be it particles, atoms, or whatever you want to call it? How is that those things are all impersonal, non-rational, non-thinking?
Argument from personal incredulity.
It's also
it's an argument.
It's a fallacy. It's
Boy, I want to be like the young guy who said, "Please, you're interrupting me." I just was a few minutes away.
Well, we just spent a lot of time asking for evidence, and then you gave us a fallacy.
What I would definitely suggest, David.
I said what people commonly do, what most people do, what you're not doing, what you're denying so many callers, is that it's presuppositional. You can't get from a...
I'm not interested in presupposing God. I'm interested for evidence for God. You can presuppose whatever you like.
And the evidence that you've suggested is essentially a fallacy of composition, as I'm understanding it, which is to say that, yes, okay, so the things that we're made out of and the things that we come from are not themselves personal, but that doesn't mean that...
like one water molecule isn't wet.
Precisely, yes.
No, what it's saying is it's impossible to believe. It's a contradiction to say impersonal atoms without moral sense of morality, plan, purpose, or whatever has produced its antithesis.
Okay, that's not what a contradiction is. A contradiction is very clearly logically defined. That is not what a contradiction is. Also, that is a fallacy of composition. Listen, if it is the case that there can be a body of water which is wet, which is made up entirely of molecules of water which are not individually wet, then it does not follow that from the constitution, the things that produce the constitution of a body having one quality means that the body itself has to have that quality.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me.
I tell you what, we're gonna.
I don't think you're hearing me anyway, to be honest. So
we're gonna stop here because we're way over time. We got one call to get to, and I've got another quick announcement, which is that once this show's over, they're going to be airing an episode of Atheist Vanguard right after this. So just in case, lightning strikes or we get disconnected before we take this last call, I wanted to thank you both so much for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Absolutely been one of my all-time favorite episodes, but.